Over the last 2 years, Kupp has seen 10 fewer targets than Woods. He's had 13 touchdowns versus Woods' 8 touchdowns in that span, and that was with only scoring 3 touchdowns last year. Right here. Talk about the Sunday night football game, the Sunday night football matchup. The Los Angeles Rams will be hosting the Chicago Bears on Sunday Night Football, which means we'll get to hear Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth again, as the Rams are 7.5-point favorites at home and a 46 over-under. If you like fresh and fantasy football content, make sure you subscribe over on the YouTube channel. Hit that like button on your way in. It would greatly help us grow this channel, and we'd greatly appreciate it. Austin, we're going to start with the Chicago Bears, arch rivals of our Green Bay Packers, and we're going to start with Andy Dalton, and I just really want to know, how short is Andy Dalton's leash here?
I don't think he's on a leash. I think he's in a noose. And I think he's a
Get
sacrifice.
bodied.
Yeah. Oof.
Dalton is going to do one of two things. He's either going to go off like a boss and earn the job that he already has, or he'll do anything other than that, take a bunch of hits, and then he's going to hold the clipboard. He's going to need to do both, win and be impressive, to earn the job that they already say is his. He's a sacrificial lamb, man. He's not on a short leash.
Yeah, and that's what it looks like, because if you look at the schedule after this, it opens up pretty well for maybe a Justin Fields homecoming, which is what, or homecoming, home. I guess it's homecoming.
I guess it could be.
It's time for us to get to Justin Fields, is what I'm getting at here, and that would mean a lot of good things for Allen Robinson in this passing core. But Johnny, for this game against the Bears, anything outside of Allen Robinson, or are you just trusting the target market share that Robinson's going to have in this tough matchup?
Yeah, basically you're just trusting in the market share, and you draft him to be one of those dominant wide receivers. It's not looking great outlook for this weekend, going against Ramsey most likely on most of the snaps. So not a great start. And I do want to mention that the Rams secondary, they only allowed 2 receiving games of more than 100 yards last year to any wide receiver. Robinson last year, when they played, had 4 receptions for 70 yards against this defense. So Robinson's ceiling this season is still in the wide receiver 1 range. However, in this week's matchup, he's more of a wide receiver 2. So just know that when you're putting him in your lineup, be expecting, a down day per se.
Yeah, and I think that's the case for everybody outside of Robinson. We're just not starting, and that includes the tight ends. When we look at these tight ends, I want to be, mindful of the usage, because I do think Klmet could be a breakout this year, and Jimmy Graham still exists. So I want to see the usage. It's a tough draw. They, obviously the Rams gave up the 8th fewest yards to the tight end last year, so we're not starting either of those guys. But Austin, you told us about Dalton. I want to get into the running back room, because we've all been talking about David Montgomery this offseason. We've all been kind of hyped on David Montgomery and his outlook. He had 6 straight games of 20 or more fantasy points and half-point PPR last year, 8 touchdowns over those final 6 weeks, ended the year as the RB6 in standard and the RB4 in PPR. This is the good first test to that easy matchup narrative that we've had, because we were told those 6 cupcake matches were why he finished that way. That's why we drafted him in the 2nd and 3rd rounds, and we drafted Jonathan Taylor in the 1st. The Rams were the 5th best D against the run last year. You are starting Montgomery in most cases, unless you went heavy RB robust and you have something else in there. You're starting Montgomery, but I just want to be on the lookout for Damian Williams and his pass catching role. We saw Monty completely absorb Cohen's work last year. I want to know if that's going to be the case this year, as they bring in a journeyman who's been known for his pass catching in previous stops in Damian Williams. Austin, now I want to ask you about the other side. The exciting side of this matchup really is the Rams and Matt Stafford coming to this new offense, being traded a boatload of picks for. I mean, Stafford's a guy we've watched closely, Austin, as Packers fans. We've seen Stafford play our Packers a lot. How are you looking at this new lineup, this new team he's on, and this new coach he's got?
Initially I was really excited about Matt Stafford, and I thought we're going to see some crazy ceiling action from Matt Stafford, reminiscent of his 2011 Detroit days, where he had over 5,000 yards passing and 41 touchdowns with just 16 interceptions. And there's a path where that does happen, Travis. But when I'm looking at last season, and one of the things working in Stafford's favor is that he had the 3rd most amount of dropped balls last year. This was not on Matt Stafford's fault. This came from poor wide receiver play. Now, Jared Goff was the number 16. So it's number 3 versus number 16. So you assume then if Stafford is in Goff's role, he's going to have more yards, more touchdowns, because there's better offensive weapons around him to pick up the slack from it. But honestly, man, Detroit and LA, looking through the numbers, had pretty similar pass attempts through their last 3 seasons. But Detroit has been used to be playing from behind. as well. LA has a great defense this season and a better cast of weapons and a running back situation too, I'd argue. So I'm not really sure if Stafford is going to have to ball out actually on this LA Rams team and flirt with his ceiling to win football games. That doesn't do great for your fantasy squad. I think he's going to be good, but I just don't think we're going to be seeing this 5,000 yard, 40 plus touchdown season out of Matt Stafford. I'm not in love with him week 1 either, going up against Chicago's 9th best pass defense, but you could do a lot worse, Travis. You drafted him. It's exciting. It's a great new team, great weapons. You're going to start him week 1. But again, because of how good this team is, I'm not sure if we're going to see that ceiling type of performance season long from Stafford.
It's such an interesting take, because if you look at the fantasy football industry, they were savvy to this. We didn't draft Matt Stafford as some high upside guy. We didn't draft him as a ceiling. He was kind of that fringe QB1. So definitely something to keep an eye on. So if that's the case, Johnny, we're looking at maybe the old McVay offense where it runs through the running back room, where it's going to be run first and those things. And so when I look at this running back room, we had Darrell Henderson get the injury. We had Cam Akers go down. Henderson seems to be fully healthy now. That's what the reports are saying. But then the Rams go and trade Sony Michel, who has now become a popular stash in the later rounds of drafts. Where are we at with this running back room in a really tough matchup this week?
I do ultimately believe that Sony Michel will be the better start for this week. I think his floor is safer because I do think he is going to get the bulk of the receiving work out of the backfield, which I do think is how they're going to try and attack this Bears defensive line, which is very good. I do expect Henderson to be involved. I think he'll get anywhere from 10 to 12, maybe 13 touches in this game, but I think they're all going to come on the ground, and I'm not so certain he gets that goal line work. Sony Michel has been very good around the goal line, and so I do think at the end of the day, Sony gets around the same amount of carries as Henderson, but also does see the passing work and potentially that goal line. So for me, I would rather start Sony. I know that sounds absolutely disgusting, but I would rather start Sony if I have to start one of these two. But I do fully admit that this could be a straight up split. It could be right down the middle. We're not so certain 100% on how this is going to go. It's just basically what we've heard from Sean McVay and what tendencies he's generally used when scheming up guys. So that's where my head's at and why I would, in general, go with Sony over Henderson this week. But I do think it's more of a flex play as opposed to being like, yeah, it's a definite RB2 for you.
I want to talk a little bit about the pass catchers. The debate all offseason has been Robert Woods or Cooper Kupp. We've been making that debate. We did it on the Face-Off show. Robert Woods, top 15 wide receiver in PPR for 3 years straight. He will lose out to Jared Goff and his ways to, kind of want to dump the ball down a lot of ways. But I still like Robert Woods. I don't know if I love him more than Cooper Kupp in this matchup. Over the last 2 years, Kupp has seen 10 fewer targets than Woods. He's had 13 touchdowns versus Woods, 8 touchdowns in that span, and that was with only scoring 3 touchdowns last year. 507 yards after the catch, which was 3rd in the league. Robert Woods ranked 4th. So we know what this offense wants to be. It wants to run and then get the ball in these wide receivers' hands. So we'll see. My bet remains the same, that Kupp is the guy I want to bet on. But if Stafford hits his ceiling, as Austin was talking about, then we have 2 weekly top 15 wide receivers every single week, and that could be something that becomes very interesting. Don't mind you drafting Robert Woods. Don't mind if you have to start him this week based on your build, but for me, it's Kupp, and I think Kupp is actually a lot safer and more in that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 range where, Woods is going to be more of your flex. Johnny, I wanted to ask you quickly about Higbee. We've been on the banging the drum for Higbee all offseason. Now he doesn't have Everett, but he is facing a tougher matchup in these Bears.
Yeah, I still think you're going to go out and start him. Again, I think that he'll be one of the major beneficiaries for, as far as receiving work from Matthew Stafford. And it isn't the greatest matchup on paper, but I do expect him to get a significant amount of targets to where you're okay starting him for your fantasy roster.
Right here.
Oh, hey, you made it to the end of the video. If you like what you saw, go ahead and hit subscribe. Make sure you hit that bell so you get notified anytime we drop new content or go live. And if you're still not sold yet, check out one of these videos.